Welcome. We're at the top of the hour, noon central for me. Dennis is an hour later, but we got people all over the world. It looks like Lena from the team already kicked this off. But as you join, if you want to jump in the chat and let us know where you're tuning in from, would love to see all around the world who's thinking about AI agents with their team. I'm very excited to kick this off with Dennis today, who's hailing from Toronto. I'll spoil your locale. Um,
Sam, and where are you from? Is it a big state? Is it a little state?
it's the greatest state of Wisconsin, Dennis, and it's not Minneapolis, not Minnesota. For anyone who's geographically challenged that way. Excited for everyone who's joining. We had a lot of interest in this event. Um, I'll spoil a little bit of Dennis's resume as people roll in. You might have seen him already on a LinkedIn Learning course or on his research blog or any of his writing. So very excited to kind of bring a lot of what we've learned and what Dennis has learned over the last 6 months, a year and a half to the center stage today. We'll get started one, maybe 2 minutes, just because we have a full packed agenda. But what I will do is I will open the poll. If you go to the top right, you'll see a poll option, that poll tab. We always love to start these workshops with a poll. It's a great chance to let us know where you're at in your AI agent maturity journey, and it helps Dennis and myself speak a little bit more specifically to what people are working on. Awesome. And a reminder as people roll in, let us know where you're tuning in from. We got France, we got California, we got the UK, Boston. Hi, Josh. Belgium. It's got to be late, right? Yeah. Well, it's after working hours for some of these people. So thanks for jumping in and joining us today. Awesome, Dennis. If you want to go ahead and pull up your slides, we can get that queued up and ready to rock.
Let's do it.
New Hampshire, Phoenix, France. Welcome, everyone. Yeah, and one more reminder there from Lena. If you're just joining, let us know where you're tuning in from, and head over to the poll tab and give us a little thought on where is your team on the AI agent production journey. It's a long journey, and it's a new journey for many teams. So we're curious, really, more than anything, to understand where people are at, whether it's starting and just exploring with LLMs, or maybe you got multiple AI agents already running in production. Good for you, right? This workshop today is really going to be about taking that initial strategy and thinking about that blueprint to first use case and beyond. Um, awesome. That said, Dennis, we can kick it off, and I'm excited to tackle this today. As I had mentioned, we had a lot of interest in this topic. You might have already come to some events led by Pete and myself on the making bots side of our virtual workshops. And this one's going to be a little bit more about strategy and the blueprint of actually thinking about measuring, planning, forecasting for AI agents as like core products to your team. So excited about that today. My name's Sam. I lead the marketing team over at Voiceflow. But more than anything, excited to have Dennis join me today. You might have seen him on LinkedIn Learning talking about AI agents, LLMs, and everything machine learning. But before that, he spent the last year and a half, 2 years actually building a lot of the AI functionality and infrastructure in Voiceflow, and really thinking deeply about how can teams best build AI agents for their business as core products. So he's the expert on all things AI blueprint and products. So Dennis, that said, incredibly excited to have you here today, my friend.
Thanks, Sam. It's actually been almost 3 years now. Time flies in the AI world. So
Wow. Okay, well there you go. Thank you for the note there. That's impressive. Um, I wanted to take a quick call out before Dennis fully jumps in, and just call out a few of the teams that signed up to be here today and that have already jumped in the chat. The reason I'm doing this is I think it's always good, and it's sobering and refreshing to realize that every industry, every team, every use case is on the table right now. Everyone's thinking about this. You're in good company if you're here thinking about how to deploy your AI agent strategy. So we have product leaders, CIOs, CTOs, designers, developers from all of these teams, and a lot more joining today. So just wanted to call that out. Thank you for being here. excited to talk about AI agent strategy moving forward. You want to hop to the next one, Dennis? Great. I'll fly by the agenda. We're going to start with some AI product blockers that actually came from everyone here. We'll jump into getting from idea to production, defining business metrics, thinking of AI products as true product management, building the team. Got a lot of questions on that one. And then navigating risk and security, which is table stakes today to getting anything LLM into production. So that
So
said, yeah, go ahead, Dennis. Why don't you hop in and let us know what you saw on the forum.
yeah, for sure. So we were curious when we were organizing the event of what would be the biggest blockers, and by coincidence or foresight, whatever you want to call it, a lot of the things aligned with what we were talking about. So we asked the group in a poll, sort of, what are you thinking about? What are your pain points? What keeps you up at night? And this is kind of what we saw, right? Getting into production, realizing value, measuring success, working with teams, figuring out the skills that we need to succeed, and dealing with privacy, hallucinations, IP, all the fun stuff that's circling around in the AI world. So now, I guess to frame the conversation, the way we think about AI agents is that there are so many use cases that we need to consider, and it'll really depend on what you want to do within your company and organization. We've seen use cases across support, revenue, optimization and collection, internal ops, Copilot applications. There's just so much. And it gets even more complex when you think about what are all the different things that I need. I need to think about the models, different tooling and techniques I need to use, what kind of data needs to be incorporated, the interfaces of where this agent will live, and then the analytics metrics side of it. So it's a complex topic, which is why we want to go through this blueprint on how do you actually implement this high level strategy that most organizations have now and get it into production and over the finish line. And the core question here is that when you're building a product or a product line, you want to make sure that it's sustainable. It's not just something you throw into production and it kind of dies there and becomes a sad experience. You want to build this core product experience that gets better, more powerful, and you can really bring it along with the rest of your organizational excellence. Now, the goal here is that we want to figure out how we can align for all of these different objectives that we've mentioned before. And at the end of the day, customize it for your business to be a reliable way to power these experiences. So a lot has changed in the past year, 2 years, 3 years. Some of us have gotten gray hairs from that, but we keep trekking along. Um, 2023 started off as a year of AI hype. I think it's important to acknowledge that because ChatGPT came up and everybody was using it. We got to 100 million users, or ChatGPT got to 100 million users faster than any product. It really was this sensation, and most teams were figuring out how to use this. They were asking questions about LLMs, models, should they be investing in the technology, and then starting to ask the introductory questions of techniques to use, like RAG or fine tuning their own model, as sort of strategies were being formed. And a lot of the deliverables that we saw in 2023, early 2023, was proof of concepts. We saw some cool demos, and we started to get into the comparison of models. Now, what changed in 2024 is that people started to gain that baseline of what is AI, what can we do, and now leadership is asking, well, what's the ROI here? How do I measure ROI? What kind of use cases am I building for? If you're in a larger organization, you might have legacy systems to integrate with. If you're in a smaller organization, you might figure out how does this affect your existing workflows? And then scale, right? We see these POCs, but how do you get them into production? But also, how do you implement the strategy across different teams that have very different capabilities and needs? So we're starting to see that getting into production and understanding the financial component of that is becoming so important. and making sure that AI lifts the whole rising tide of your organization rather than just a few innovation teams. Now, uh, we're no different than any organization, and I think we want to share our journey as part of it as well for the context of putting specific examples in place. So, sort of late 2022, early 2023, we delivered on a internal agent called Tico, and it was really an exploration of how do we automate our support processes across a number of different channels. And this worked quite well. We hit a 91% resolution rate. There's a whole talk by Tasim about it, which was quite awesome. We deployed to many different channels while maintaining strong customer satisfaction. Now, 2024 is really about going even further with the business value. So, automating more complex tickets, figuring out how to prioritize customer facing versus internal automation, documentation management, knowledge management, and then figuring out where does that level of automation lie? What is the maximum that we can achieve while delivering strong customer experiences? So this continues to evolve. You need to stay agile as you're building through these things because the landscape changes so quickly. Just under an hour ago, Llama 3 was released. Big announcement there from the open source community. So things move fast. So now we'll talk about some things about how to take an idea into production. As we saw in the poll, people are going through different levels, whether exploring the technology, running proof of concepts, or being in production already and trying to find where you can optimize and move forwards. So typically, when going into production within an organization, especially under the pressure of a current AI environment, a lot of people get the message of why aren't we launching features fast enough? Where is our AI agent? Where are all these experiences? And it's important as somebody within an organization to understand where the limitations are. Are they on the product side? Are they on the business case side? Are they on the technology side? Are they on the budget side? Right. So really important questions to ask to have a concrete answer to this because it'll vary for every organization. So it's important to have the right questions to be prepared for that conversation. The next component is that once you're scaling into production, you're going to have to loop in a bunch of teams, especially if you're in an enterprise context and you're trying to figure out, okay, what is my launch plan? What is the support plan? How do I bring in customer experience, legal, risk, security? The list goes on. So it's really important to bring stakeholders in as early as possible and build, iterate, and deploy together. And then we've noticed, and I think many organizations are thinking about this, is you get into this proof of concept purgatory, right? So you build this demo, you release the demo, you make a cool video, whether internal or external, but when is it live? When is it working? So I think a lot of organizations are there where they're trying to figure out how do I go from POC into production, and it's challenging. It really is. So it's really important to be able to push past that. And the strongest way to do that is to have a really strong business case where the leadership teams cannot say no, whether it's the security teams, risk teams, finance teams, or any other team that's asking critical questions. Now, to get into production, there's actually different ways of measuring what production means. So, something important that we talk about is that you really want to start off with this crawl phase of launching into production. Um, just like we learn and mature, if you've ever seen a baby try to get up and run, they usually fall flat. Sure, Sam can attest to that as well. But you have to start off with some basics here, right? You're crawling, you're figuring out, putting something into production that works, meets a use case, and delivers value. And this requires a lot of work, right? You need to define the business case, build out the architecture, build that proof of concept, test and prototype it out, and then launch to production. So even getting into crawl is fairly complex, but it's required to deliver on that grand vision of walking or running with very complex AI agents.
Yeah, one note there, Dennis, that a lot of the teams that we're talking to as well, you and myself, is like they have run aspirations, and that's great. Like every team can get to a run. I think that's right. But I think it's you could probably create some pretty good run level agents, with 17 different solutions, 40 different models, and then it's like, great, I got the POC, but really, is it ever going to see the light of day? No, right? So I think a lot of it is reversing that methodology to what you have on the right, and just a call out because I think every team can get to run, but if you start at run, you'll never do more than that one POC realistically.
Yeah. And it's building those muscles so that when you go up to build that use case and present it, it could be successful and you can iterate on it rather than having just a grand vision and trying to execute it right away without that iterative process. Right. So typically, we like to, as we go through this build cycle, is to have teams think about three different areas. So understanding, deciding, and responding. So across agents, we think that these are three consistent themes or questions that come up. So how do you understand what the user is saying? There's a number of different techniques here for recognizing things, either with LLMs or other models. Then we get into the decide step of figuring out the business logic, figuring out how to route intention and being personalized. Finally, getting into the responses of, are you going to use a RAG architecture? Do you have static responses? Are you connecting to a database to fetch those responses? So each of these components are very important and they help you become more mature. Uh, the other component here is that different teams will likely work on these different components. So you need to bring in expertise across all of these in order to get to success. Now, let's say that you've gotten to crawl already. You have an agent in production that's answering support FAQs. What you might have noticed on this diagram is there's two different axes. There's agent complexity and there are integrations and interfaces. So as a leader within an organization, whether on the technology or product side, you need to figure out what's next. Are you going to add more use cases? So in the case of e-commerce, is it more workflows, more automation there? Do you expand into things like product recommendations or sales assistance? These are all new use cases that are important to add and that the business might say is the priority. On the other side, you might focus on the integration component, whether how a user interacts with your product, with your agent, or integrating with your existing systems, right? So whether it's a ticketing integration, a voice integration, or product catalog integration. So depending on where you are on that maturity curve within crawl, walk, run, you always have that decision to make on what is the next step. And that's something that you within your business will be able to think about and make that decision. All right. So we sort of framed the discussion of we want to get into production. We start off with a crawl approach. Let's talk about some of these metrics, right? How do we measure success? How do we make sure that people are aligned? So what we've often found is that, especially in the current AI wave, sometimes people ask for LLMs or AI without considering the business need first, and that can be a really tricky question when somebody asks you, how do we do AI, right? So it's important to take a step back and think about what are the business needs and find that intersection between business and LLM capabilities. So LLMs, AI, they're all tools to help us accomplish some kind of business need. Now, for the metrics today, I'll talk about sort of four different categories about use cases, different types of metrics that we either want to maintain or improve, how to use metrics to iterate, and how to think about costs, because that's really important in an LLM component, especially when making business-based decisions. And the final thing is that I think it's really important to think about the customer, right? So we've probably all used products where it feels like you have a product right here, and then you have AI just somewhere, right? Or over here, right? And just having AI tacked on feels funky at times. So when we're launching these products, it's really important to figure out, is this helping our customer out? Is this sparking joy? Is it making the product better?
Yeah, and one call out there, Dennis, as you go to the next slide too. I think a lot of teams are maybe when you talk about slapping on AI to something, right? They might have an NLU or deterministic bot running that they want to, improve to like an AI resolution goal, right? But I think the hard part for these teams is that Yeah, could you just add AI to it? Yes, but it's not an either or. Oftentimes, that's why it's important to mix AI responses with deterministic responses for the specific tasks to be done, and that's that design-led thinking. I think that any conversation designer in the room could think about, or any person thinking about the customer experience will empathize with. It's important to think about AI as integrated to the product, not a switch that you flipped on. Right, to your point.
Yeah, absolutely. So going into the first differentiator, I think it's important to understand, are you building something that will automate a use case, or is it going to augment a use case? So I have two examples here. The one on the left is a company that does car rentals called Roam. And in their use case, they've automated support with an AI agent. So they're trying to automate that workflow. So the metrics that they'll be measuring will be related to that. On the right-hand side, we have a different workflow. This is an internal workflow where we've augmented our support organization with a framework called Tico Assist. So this is an agent that helps our support team by pulling up relevant information, providing answers, and as such, we're measuring different metrics. We're measuring how can AI and humans better work together to deliver on a goal rather than trying to take the humans out of the loop. So really important distinction here. I know companies are thinking about different kinds of use cases, and a lot of them are internal automation. So those will be quite different than sort of full automation without human in the loop and such. So now we get into the question of what are we going to do with these metrics, right? So different metrics have different goals. We've classified them into two categories. One is move metrics and one is maintain. So for move, we want to move some kind of metric, whether increase it or decrease it. So for example, in a support organization, you might want to decrease your time to first response. So acknowledging that a user issue happened and providing some kind of resolution. And you might want to move this metric because it improves the performance of that organization, right? The support organization is measured by the metric of acknowledging issues, resolving them, having happy customers. Um, Now, on the other side, you might have metrics that you want to maintain. So, for example, you want to maintain customer satisfaction, right? If you are working in an organization where you have great relationships with your customer, you do not want to introduce AI and ruin that, right? So, as an organization, you might want to maintain that while moving other metrics. Um, but in some other organizations, what might be happening is your organization might suffer from low customer satisfaction, right? Because people aren't responding in time, they're not delivering a satisfactory response. So in that case, it would actually be a move metric. So here you need to figure out within your organization, what do you want to change versus what do you want to maintain? Likewise, if we go to the team structure, many companies are talking about in their releases about, to shareholders that their plan is to maintain a flat organizational structure and size and let AI automation augment that to be more productive. So we've seen that it was in the recent Amazon report. It's been in many other company reports. So we're seeing that trend as well. So categorizing across these two buckets is really important and really frames the conversation of what we want to optimize. Now, when we usually define metrics, there's a reason for it. We want to measure something that we care about, and we don't just want to measure it so there's a fancy dashboard somewhere. We want to make sure that we iterate through them and actually improve our AI agents. So, as a first example, here are three metrics that might be changing. Right, we might have CSAT that's decreasing, we might have costs that are increasing, and we might have certain issues that an AI agent is handling that is too slow. Or not being addressed. So we need to first identify what is this cause, right? So we have a metric that's moved in some kind of way. We might not be happy. What is the root cause of this? And after that, we can propose next steps, right? And it's really important not to get ahead of yourself and try to propose next steps without diving deep into the root cause analysis, right? So um, sometimes these metrics might move, but they might be for other reasons, right? So customer satisfaction might have decreased because you made a separate product change that's confunding with the introduction of the AI agent. So that investigation is very important, and you build those muscles as you go through several of these cycles. So through that perspective, you'll have very different next steps to address each of these concerns.
I do want to call out, Dennis, like when we're talking with teams about, hey, where do you want to start? You know, none of these metrics are like brand new. AI didn't invent new business problems, right? But what we're seeing is AI applied with the right guardrails and design-led thinking actually solves a lot of these core business problems better than any technology has to this point, right? So I think it's a really good call out because it's not a new metric, but you're able to ask actually new questions about improving, solving, and actually drilling down on how to make it better. So I said this to you earlier. I think this is an incredibly helpful like methodology for teams to think through, and I think they can apply it to most of their core business problems that their team is already assigned to fix.
Absolutely. Um, so similar problems, we're working through it. Now we have this new tool set of AI to help us out with it. Now, a lot of other questions that we get are about cost, right? And LLM costs have actually come down by 600 times. So when GPT-3 was out, the cost of that was quite immense. Now with the introduction of new models, costs have come down incredibly, right? It's been staggering to watch where you actually have to check your LLM provider websites monthly and keep up to date with it because prices are dropping, which is great. But even with lower prices, there's a reason they're called large language models. They are large, they are resource intensive, and if you run them in a fairly naive way, things can get very expensive per interaction. So let's say that you want to fill GPT-4 with a full context window, so using all 128,000 tokens in the context. It's going to be expensive. It's going to cost you over $1 per interaction. And you might have many interactions within your AI agent. Likewise, even the current cheapest model on the market, Haiku, can still get very expensive with full context. So very important to think about what are your costs with AI agents and how do you actually optimize for that. Now, the other aspect of that, so we sort of talked about the cost per interaction, is how many interactions are you doing? So just pulled out this tweet I saw the other day about the way that people are building some AI agents require many LLM calls. So if you stack $1 per interaction by 30 LLM calls, you suddenly have an AI agent that costs $30 to do a task, which usually will not make the finance organization happy, right? So you need to think about both of these axes on how to optimize the cost per interaction as well as the number of LLM calls that you're doing. Now, the other thing that I want to mention is that the cost of LLMs and technology is not the only cost. So engineering time, team time is something that we cannot ignore. So the trade-off between optimizing a prompt might be worth a certain number of production calls. So in this graph here, it's actually in a blog post that's coming out very soon. We talk about what is the trade-off between having an engineer spend X amount of time optimizing a model, prompting a model, fine-tuning a model, versus the decrease in cost for production. So if an engineer is working for 10 hours, that might be worth 1 million Haiku calls, right? So you have to ask yourself, am I going to see that volume of 1 million to justify spending the time doing these optimizations? Or is a first production launch with satisfactory accuracy, guardrails, etc., am I okay to do that in an unoptimized format? And it'll really depend on the model. Like optimizing GPT-4 prompts gives you a positive ROI at 50,000 API calls. So really depending on your use case and on your model, but it's really important not to over-index on LLM costs, but also to consider the cost of your team, right? It's just something that's so important, and reminding that as we continue to build in this new domain. So you're talking about a lot of metrics, internal metrics, optimizing those to iterate, build more quickly, optimize on costs. But at the end of the day, we need to think about the impact of this project. So this is just a chart that we have for one of our use cases from a customer. So they automated almost 60% of their support tickets within 19 weeks. And they saved a lot of money and had a lot of happy customers throughout that process. And they did this across 90 product lines. So This, at the end of the day, is what success looks like, right? This is a successful implementation of an AI agent. So regardless of the internal metrics, like this is at the end of the day what success is measured on: is did you deliver an AI agent that automated, saved money, and provided the capabilities um, to deliver on. So all those smaller metrics are really important as part of that build process. But from a case study and really saying that we as an organization have succeeded, these kinds of metrics are the ones that matter. Okay. So how do we get there? How do we get to success? So with an AI scope in mind, product management does change. So when there's this energy, right, to build within AI, we've typically seen that every team tries to build their own proof of concept. They spin up their own instances of different tooling. They start experimenting, which is great. But if you're building across a large team, you're going to need to collaborate together, right? You need to work cohesively together. You need to have different factors in mind: integration, security, and everything else. And as we think about it from a blueprint perspective for an organization to be successful, you need to find a way to unify and align across teams. Now, we got a lot of questions in the signups about the skills of an applied AI team, and so I'm just going to go through some five roles. All these roles have existed before for technology projects, but calling out the differences here. So Uh, the most important thing that we need is that we need product direction, right? We need to make sure that what we're building satisfies customer needs and delivers on what our business is for. That's like the number one priority. After that, it comes into the expectations and the delivery side. So, how do we improve those workflows that we talked about? How do we make AI feel native as part of that? And then actually integrating it into the product from a front end, back end, and ML perspective. So really important here. But at the end of the day, we don't need anything too different from successful previous product management. We want to deliver on what we have already, right? We The world has launched successful technology projects in the past 50 years. It's not always rocket science. So keep it simple, but remember that every role is very important for a successful project delivery. Now, a lot of questions that we get from our customers and just seeing in the industry is how do you de-risk going into production? So we have this chasm between POC purgatory and production. How do we make the leap? So similarly to the technology delivery side, we have similar techniques that we use internally and have seen the most successful teams use as well. So having a review environment is really important, and how quickly you can get a POC into a review environment that mimics production, right? And then your corresponding stakeholders can provide their reviews on the business side and technology side. Once you release into that environment, having feature flags where you release to production, but only allow this for a small set of users is really important. So we call this internal feature flagging, where we'll push a product or an agent into production, limited to a very small set of users just to do a test to make sure that it's working. Afterwards, we run a private beta, typically called a private preview, where we're going to validate it with select users, whether it's from the community, power users that we've built relationships with, or select customers. So this is really important to get that initial feedback after going through this whole journey to make sure at the end of the day, are we solving the product needs and helping the customers who are going to be using it? And finally, we go into production, just general release for everybody. Sometimes companies also do a public preview for an opt in, but this is really the end of the day of what it means to be truly in production. So, going to production isn't just one stage. We typically call it 4 or 5, which is really important because now this chasm gets a little bit smaller. It's a combination of small jumps from POC into production rather than just one gargantuan leap. And now, going back to the question of are we being successful with this, it's really important to measure two key things. It's that initial time to market of getting an AI agent into production, but also the time it takes to iterate across. So every time you add a feature or make a change, you should be going through this process. And it shouldn't be intimidating. It should be, oh, we made this change. let's go through this process and make sure everything works. So when we release it to the general market, it's a good experience.
One of my favorite examples of this, Dennis, is teams that maybe start with this example of automating 60% of their FAQs, right? Like they're using a tailored knowledge base. They have one channel and they've integrated with Zendesk, for example, right? And it's like, that's great. And now they're thinking, okay, great. They're in this mindset of like, okay, so what if we started to automate level 2 tickets? What's possible then, right? Or like, what if this actually was working in Discord like the Tico team does, right? So this mindset, although maybe not rocket science, it allows the right framework, I think, for thinking of this crawl, walk, run building methodology, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it provides us the opportunity to revisit past technology decisions or product decisions that we've made because, again, the market moves so quickly. A new model comes out, a new technique comes out. If the team is iterating and moving quickly, then you'll be able to adapt and make sure that you're at the forefront. Now, we got a lot of questions. I think this is the most common category of questions we got is how do I build the team that can deliver on AI agents? So we have 5 general recommendations that we've seen that the most successful teams work through. So the first one is building out that general level of skill. So this might be through courses, hands-on exercises to really understand what are AI agents capable of. And this extends across the org, right? So we saw the different members of the team that need to be present to deliver successfully. That education is helpful across the whole group. It's very difficult to deliver a successful AI agent if only the ML engineers know about AI agents, right? So you need to build that experience there. After that, we sort of get to a level where we have a baseline, and this is where conferences, webinars, talks are really helpful. You can dive deeper, ask good questions, meet peers who are solving similar problems, right? Again, not rocket science, but very helpful for organizations. Once organizations feel that they have a certain baseline, hackathons are an amazing way to practice this whole life cycle journey of building a product, figuring out use cases, validating LLM assumptions, and really practice that cross-functional delivery. So we've seen a number of customers and companies generally, an idea starts off with a hackathon and they build something amazing. And then we get into proof of concept. So throughout this talk, I've been talking about proof of concept purgatory, but proof of concepts are amazing. You need to validate an idea. You need to test with customers. You need to make sure that it can actually work. And the best way to get an agent into production is to start building. Then finally, for specific use cases, for ambitious projects, you might need to hire somebody with additional skills. This is something that leaders think about all the time is how do you get the right talent within an organization and how do you coach existing teams to be successful? So all along this journey, you'll end up with a team that is capable of delivering, and it's important to have trust in that team by providing them the right resources to become capable of delivering AI agents.
As you flip to this last section, just a quick call out. We have this last section here on security, and then we'll be jumping into Q&A. So if you do have any questions, you can drop them in the chat or right into that Q&A tab, as Lena had called out. And we'll be answering those in the last 15 minutes of the hour. Back to you, Dennis.
All right, awesome. Okay, so we might have felt this before, is that within an organization, you join an all hands, you might listen into an investor call, and the CEO is saying, we're building with AI and it's our top priority. And then you head over internally, and the question is to the security team, when are we launching things? And you just get a no, right? No AI, we've banned these different tools. What is happening? So this is a complex situation to navigate. Typically happens within an enterprise environment, but sometimes in small organizations, it happens as well. So it can be challenging. We have to acknowledge that to go through this journey. So this last component sort of talks about how to ask the questions and sort of get to a ground where everybody in an organization is comfortable. So you might receive pushback on using LLMs or AI in a certain type of response. So security might say, or risk might say, we're not deploying customer-facing LLMs into production. And that might be a very valid point, but it's important to understand what is the actual concern from the team, right? So, is there a concern about any kind of LLM, or can a use case be internal? Um, are they worried about generated content, or is classification and routing okay? How about human in the loop, right? To validate that responses are free from hallucinations. And thinking about other questions about what kind of business case would justify the use of AI, um, or do we have some concern about our data, our IP, and other things, right? So every question can in the AI world can be met with another question. I think that's really important as you're building within a team or guiding these kinds of initiatives. Otherwise, it's very easy to get stuck between a rock and a hard place where leadership is saying, let's build with AI, but there are all these barriers along the way. So going into a little bit of role play here of what the discussion might look like between a security team and a product team. So a security team might say, no customer facing LLMs. And then the product team, it's important to figure out what is the main concern here. So a common concern we've heard is about how is our data being used for training? Are these large language model providers using our data that is highly confidential? So at this point, you might need to bring in another stakeholder, right? You might need to bring in legal to say, okay, we've gone through the contract with these large language model providers, whether it's Anthropic, Google, OpenAI, Azure, etc., Amazon, and figure out if we get sign off from legal where we're legally protected in this concern, is that okay to launch? And security might say, well, that's not enough for confidential data. That data is so important that we aren't willing to launch. So in this case, you get to this final maybe compromise. We're saying let's launch a production use case on publicly available data. For example, if you build a support agent for your website where all the data is already there, there's nothing new going into the large language model. It's data that already exists. So this helps navigate that conversation of actually getting into a production use case. Now, sometimes security might say, no, we don't support it. So now we get into some of the other questions that they might ask, right? So we've seen contractual agreements being really important with vendors. A lot of customers are asking about different types of certifications like SOC 2 or ISO. Um, and then we get into other ways to get to success, right? So building a very strong business case where you might get approval from the CEO or very senior management to say, yes, this is absolutely necessary. Let's find a way to compromise. You might also want to build for lower risk projects. So maybe not your crown jewel project or your most important project. Let's build it for an important use case, but won't get as much attention if it fails. Or at the end of the day, the response might just be like no to LLMs, but you can still build very powerful agents, AI agents without LLMs. So there are ways to go through this journey depending on your organizational circumstance to do so. And even if you're in a small organization and it's like 20 people, 50 people, you don't have these separate departments trying to negotiate on projects, these are still very important questions to ask for yourself because if you are building an AI agent, you should be thinking about these things, right? How is my training data being used? What am I sort of getting from vendors? What is the legal assurance? Like, which project should I prioritize based on risk? So you almost need to become the subject matter expert on all these different things if you pick up that AI hat saying, yes, I'm going to build with AI, but it's not just the technology side as well. So at the end of the day, we want to get to alignment, right? When the CEO or senior leadership says building with AI is our top priority, the rest of the organization has buy-in, right? Here's what we're going to do. We've considered product security, risk, everybody important involved, legal, so many teams to name. And this is our plan, and this is how we deliver, right? So it's not ambiguous. Everybody's aligned. Everybody sees the value of this across different teams. Now we get to the end here, and what we say that the blueprint is that you need to do three main things. You need to prioritize your use cases, really understand what your customers want. You need to define success, be able to measure and think about the ROI. And finally, you need to align teams, right? So within your own team, that's the delivery team across different teams, and make sure that everybody's moving towards the same goal. again, none of this is rocket science, but it's really important to apply these common techniques that we've seen in the past succeed in the AI space. There we go. It's time for Q&A.
You are right on the money. 12:45 or 45 minutes, right on the dot. Dennis, that was awesome. Thank you for walking us through. Yeah, I'm excited to hop right into the Q&A, as people might have meetings at the top of the hour. This is your chance to ask questions directly of Dennis, and I'm going to pull these questions right up on stage here. So Greg asked, can you share insights from AI agent use cases beyond customer support? We hear this a lot, Dennis, but what are you seeing right now, typically?
Yeah, so we're seeing AI agents for things like product recommendations and search. That's a big one. We're seeing things like human augmentation, for example, pulling up the relevant information, providing context for people to make decisions, kind of that Copilot framework. We're seeing things for things like lead generation, customer follow-up. There's really a huge bucket and category. I think what's been really amazing about AI is that if you can dream it, you can probably put something together. And then once you have a clear vision of what you want to build, then it gets into prioritization.
The one common thread is that even no customer support use case is the same across teams, right? Like every workflow is a little bit different. Every customer, every data need, sensitivity, it's all a little bit different. So that's made it incredibly enjoyable and fun for our team as we talk about different use cases and that crawl, walk, run. But yeah, that's definitely the list so far. Talking about using different LLMs here. This can probably be a quick one, but you want to talk through, Dennis, like from an AI product development perspective, using different LLMs here?
Yeah, for sure. So I think given the rate of change, it's really important to be familiar with the different LLM models. So the way we've integrated it is using the different APIs available. So we have native integrations within the platform. We also have API steps and functions. So as a platform, our main goal is to give users the ability to build what they want, providing the tools sort of within that understand, decide, response framework. So yes, you can integrate through either through native methods or by using the different types of steps.
Fast follow from the same guest here. I think this is a really good question because a lot of people we see will start with like a Copilot type of not the use case, but a Copilot tool to like stand something up quickly, right? So Dennis, why are you seeing people jump to more of like a granular control and more custom agents?
Yeah, so I think there's a few reasons for this. So the first one is that Copilot's usually focused on one tool. So the original coding Copilot focused on coding within a development environment. We've seen other Copilots within other tools, but workflows are usually across tools for a certain goal, right? So you want to have that flexibility to accomplish that goal across several different tools. For example, the most successful AI agents we've seen integrate with 10 different tools, have different steps along the way, different customizations that are needed because every different organization has a different workflow.
And even just down to the responses themselves, right? Like if you want to have like granular control over exactly what's served, but yet have the power of really going behind the prompting, that's where we see teams say like, okay, if we're going to take this seriously as a product, like you would never just upload all your data and launch a website, right? And be like, oh, whatever's there is great. Like that typically won't fly when you're taking that next step and thinking of these as products. From your point of view. Oh, here. So what I thought this one was good. We talked a lot about what people told us as far as blockers, but Dennis, putting you on the hot seat, Valentina, is what is the number one thing that you're seeing holding back teams from getting crawl to walk, for example?
Mm-hmm. So I think that I'll flip this question around a little bit, but I actually think the biggest blockers are getting to crawl. That's the biggest thing. Many of us have interacted with AI experiences or chatbots where they're not even mediocre; they're bad, right? I'll just sort of cut out the elephant in the room, right? It's like getting to crawl is really important. Getting to walk once you get to crawl to walk, confusing myself here. Once you get to crawl, it's much easier to get to walk because you've built that muscle of iterating through building a successful use case, getting to production, and you have user feedback. I think what's really scary is when you launch a product without working with customers or getting feedback, and you just hope that it works. But if it's working okay, it's kind of solving the use case, that builds a lot of confidence. So I'd go there first. And to answer the actual question of going to walk, I think it's just the ability to really expand the use case and customize. So a point solution might work great from getting to crawl, right? You need a customer support bot that just answers some questions. But now you start thinking about integrations. You think about things like categorizing tickets, connecting with agents, integrating with databases. Suddenly, to get to that point, you need to have a platform that's powerful enough to do that. Many organizations choose to build big development teams to do that, to offer that customization, but there are other ways to do so as well.
Yeah, and a really good example of that is if you head over to our YouTube page, we do a Making Bots series where Peter Isaacs, our in-house conversation design lead, actually did one for T-Mobile. Redid their bot, thinking about, okay, what if we went more than just FAQs, right? Instead of just asking hours and serving articles, what if it actually helped you disambiguate a very contextual 3-layered troubleshooting question? Like, that's the type of thinking that people are doing when they're going from crawl to walk. There's a lot of ways to get to crawl, but there's very few correct, scalable ways to go crawl, walk, run, I think is definitely what we're seeing right now. Awesome. I'm looking at the totals here. Connectors. Dennis, this is a specific question about connectors, but maybe you want to speak a little bit about our how we see people using functions today and a little bit of that customization.
For sure. So to answer the question directly, we do have native connectors within the platform. For example, we're very customer focused, and many of our customers use Zendesk. So we built a Zendesk connector that integrates well. But even with that Zendesk connector, we've just seen so many use cases. And for Salesforce, for example, everybody's Salesforce installation looks different, even within a team, how people use it. So we definitely support building native connectors where it makes sense, but connectors also mean having a very strong opinion of how certain data works, right? So this can be a double-edged sword, because then as a team who's using a tool, right, you don't have as much customizability. So generally our goal is to build out functions or help customers build out functions that can connect to APIs and sort of reuse those functions across an agent. And after that, we can work together to figure out, okay, how can we optimize this? Do you need a native connector? What's missing here? Are teams having standard access patterns? Because we've seen teams that access the same data, but in very, very different ways. And then the connector sort of builds something for no one kind of thing, and kind of works okay for everyone, but not exactly solves all the problems.
Awesome. This is a really good question here as we work towards the top of the hour. We talked a little bit about that hybrid LLM and NLU, right? Different models, different jobs, even across LLMs and NLU, right? So I can drop a few resources on this note, but Dennis, maybe you want to share a little bit of the methodology of how we see teams approaching this.
For sure. So I think coming from a sort of AI machine learning background, what's important here is to realize the two differentiators. NLUs are typically much cheaper because they're smaller models to run, and they typically do well when you have very well structured data, defined training data, testing data to do so. So for a mature organization, you can get very good success with an NLU. LLMs are great when you have less time to spend on the training data, on updating the data, being very diligent about that, just because they can have better semantic understanding of what a user is saying. Now, what's interesting is that there might be a feature coming out leveraging the best of both worlds, and a research blog as well. So stay tuned for that. But we do think that there are different ways to use these models, and letting teams use both in a combination is also really important, since different parts of the agent need different capabilities.
Yeah, exactly. Sometimes you don't want to leave even the most finely tuned LLM up to a sensitive last step workflow per se, right? That maybe an NLU is still best fit for that today. Scott asks a great question on the specific courses and conferences. Dennis, any things that you've seen or even created that you would recommend people start with on this topic?
Yeah, so I think this question really depends of where you're at in your AI journey. I think that there's a lot of good course content out there across different platforms. I've personally created around 7 courses, both for developers, organizational leaders, sort of people using Gen AI from the foundations. But a lot of really great stuff out there. I think the community in general has done a good job to do so. I mean, from an open source perspective, if you're a developer, I think that the Hugging Face ecosystem is great. And then many of the core vendors out there have done a great job updating their learning modules to include Gen AI. So a lot of different tooling there. I think if you want to chat more about your use case and what you're learning what you want to learn, happy to chat after. But on the conference side as well, sort of similar thing. My personal background is on like the deep technology side. So the conferences I look for are the research conferences where people can speak about specific research. But in general, when you're trying to choose a conference or talk, I think those case studies and going into detail is really, really important. Likewise with webinars, right? We don't just want to hear high-level strategy. We want to see how people have built things before. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And if anyone's going to be in London this June, will be a lot of the Voiceflow team will be at Unparsed. Will also be Javi will be at Beyond Boundaries in Barcelona coming up. So a couple good conversational AI conferences even in coming up this summer. So yeah, just on that note. Awesome. Well, I think we ran out of questions here and we're almost running out of time.
One more. I think there's a question about on the support side, right, with categorizing tickets and handling those workflows. So I think this is actually a problem that we're working on internally and we start to implement is users ask different types of questions. And you can use standard sort of AI techniques to do so. We've done it in Voiceflow where we create intents for certain types of categories, and then we do additional sorting with LLMs. So for example, is this type of question, is it a bug fix? Is it a developer question? Is it a design question? Is it high priority? Is it low priority, right? So integrating with the native capabilities of the ticketing tool and sort of providing those tags and information architecture to do so. So I think, again, going back to the platform discussion, right? I think it's all possible to build just with a few LLM and NLU API calls.
Good call. Awesome. Yeah, as Lena called out, if we did not get a chance to get to your question, as we do need to wrap heading into the end of the hour, it's a good chance to connect with Dennis. Dennis is obviously very active on LinkedIn. If you want to send him a note there, you can also just click that big button in the top right and chat with Dennis. He and the whole team is constantly working with different teams on like what is this crawl, walk, run mindset, but specifically for an industry, metrics, team size, budget. As we called out, like this is a great way to think about AI agent building, but it's going to be so specific for each industry and each team. So we'll do a lot more of these style of talks on more digging into each of these topics as we go. But if you want to connect with Dennis either on LinkedIn or just hit that button in the top right, he is more than happy and willing to think about your use case and set up. Awesome. Dennis, thank you so much for taking the time to put this together and share some of your knowledge. I'm excited to do a lot more of these. And for anyone who was asking, just to confirm, we will send out a copy of this deck if you want to share it with your team or take it as part of your internal business case building. And we also will share this workshop as well on YouTube via email tomorrow. So take a look at those emails, and we'll be there tomorrow with everything. Dennis, anything else we missed as we wrap, or anything else you want to wrap with?
I mean, the space is changing quickly, so yeah, what we learn, we'll continue to update. We'll host more webinars and talks. So excited to see you there and see what everybody builds.
Amazing. Enjoy the rest of your weeks. We'll see you in a couple of weeks for our next Making Bots, and then Dennis again next month with a lot more content coming your way. Thanks all. We'll see you out there.